Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Laura Ingalls Gunn. I am coming to you for the first time in my 19th century inspired sewing space. If you've been following me on my website or Instagram, you know that I've been working on it for most of the summer. It came about because my son Ian Charles has moved out of his college apartment and he has moved back home where he will be living here until he gets married in the fall of next year. So I thought long and hard about what was the very first project that I wanted to sew in this space. And don't worry, I promise you the full tour of the sewing space will also be coming. I have a few pictures to hang and some curtains to sew, and then it will be ready for prime time. I think you're gonna love it. But I thought, what better project to sew than do the repairs on Dean Butler's shirt that he most recently wore at the Little House on the Prairie in Independence, Kansas. Now, Dean and some other members of the cast had traveled along with myself and other crew members to Independence, Kansas for a 50th anniversary celebration, and it was such a beautiful day that we went out to the site of the original Little House on the Prairie. And I'm sort of giggling because poor Dean, he had climbed up into the covered wagon along with Jennifer Donati, who played Baby Rose, and our photographer Cindy Alba was just going to capture a few photos of the event. The seat of the wagon, however, had other plans, and as soon as Dean sat down, he sort of became a tumbleweed, tumbling back into the bed of the wagon. Now, thankfully, Dean was not injured in any way, and for that, we are so thankful. His shirt, however, that he was wearing, as you can see, is literally in tatters, and I will do a close-up when we start the repairs of this shirt. This is a beautiful shirt, and it is by Filson, which is a great brand. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they really make quality clothing. But why I was interested in repairing it for Dean is two reasons. First, Dean is my friend. We actually met last year in Corsicana, Texas. I don't know if he will remember this at all, but I came up to his table and I had made a little paper snowflake that featured an illustration from one of the Little House books of Almanzo coming home to see Laura, and he comes through the door in a blizzard. So it was kind of the perfect decoration for this Christmas ornament that I gave to him. And each one of the cast members received something similar with their character or something from a scene from the Little House books. And Dean really loved the ornament. He actually shared it in a video that he did about Christmas traditions with Melissa Gilbert. So I will link down to that video below. Anyways, he had asked me what my name was, and I said, Laura Ingalls. And he chuckled, and he's like, uh-huh. And unbeknownst to me, I guess some of Dean's fans will say that they're Laura Ingalls in the hopes that they might get a kiss from Almanzo. That was not my intention at all. I was simply saying my name. So that was definitely a really hilarious meeting between the two of us, and his assistant Jen captured the moment on film from these pictures that you're seeing up on the screen. And I think it was just a really nice moment between the two of us, and I have a really fond memory of that. And you know, it was shortly after that that Olin de la Paz and Pamela Roy Lance, who you may know as Sarah Carter from the television show, invited me to sew 12 iconic costumes for the 50th anniversary celebration in Simi Valley. And I mean, what an opportunity. What an opportunity. And of course, Dean and Allison Arngrim, they were all instrumental in getting the festival up and running and going. And this opportunity was absolutely one that I did not want to say no to, but to sew 12 costumes in 2 months, if you know anything about sewing, and again, these were 3 and 4 piece costumes per mannequin. So I think there were 30 pieces in all that I sewed for the initial Little House collection. And in February, I want to say about 3 weeks before I was supposed to be in LA for the festival, I was panicking. I did not know if I was going to be able to complete this collection. Any sewist on a good day to complete that many costumes in such a short amount of time without any assistance, that's a tall order. I was sewing 10 hours a day, 7 days a week to do that. And I have lupus, and sometimes with stress, these symptoms can flare up. And so I had kind of lost the use of my left hand, which when you're sewing, you definitely, it's helpful to have 2 hands when in any of the skills, whether it be cutting, stitching, pinning. It's definitely easier with 2 hands, and so I was worried. And it was almost as if, I always say Little House magic, Little House magic. I was really getting worried, and at that time, Dean called me, and the phone call started out with his wife Catherine getting on to say that she had seen a poke bonnet that I had shared on Instagram, and how she thought it was so pretty, and it really reminded me of the bonnet that she wore on Father Murphy. And as someone who grew up watching her on Father Murphy, and then of course later on Beverly Hills 90210. Wow. What a gift. What a gift. And so their gracious nature and their kind words, I get a little overcome because they truly were instrumental in getting me over that hump and across the finish line to do that. And, you know, then I got to meet so many people there that love Little House as much as I do. What a wonderful opportunity that was for both my children and I. And, you know, again, Dean, what you see is what you get with Dean. I looked over and there he was vacuuming Mrs. Whipple's booth. And basically that is what we were calling the display where the costume collection I had created was. And that said a lot to me. You know, if you can just really get in there and help to do what needs to be done for something great to happen, that to me told me a lot of what I needed to know about the character of the real life Dean Butler. And of course, he is our beloved Almanzo. And in doing additional events with Dean, just solidified. You know, Dean has become a friend to me. He's very supportive of my work, and I just can't thank him enough. So to do this repair, because he did it up good, I am going to have to take about 3 inches off the bottom of this shirt. And currently, let's see if maybe this side is a little bit better. So currently, the original design of this shirt was that it had a shirt tail hem. And what that means is it's a little higher on the sides and then scoops down in the back and the front. And the reason why many shirts are designed that way is it helps them to stay tucked in. Now, in some of the pictures of Dean where he was wearing this shirt, he was actually wearing it over another shirt, almost like a jacket. So I got on the Filson website because I was wondering if perhaps they had a barn coat style. And a barn coat differs from a regular shirt in that it normally stops around the area of where your hip bones are. Maybe a little bit shorter to where the natural bend of your waist is. So if we were going to shorten this, barn coats are the same length all the way around. And on their website, they absolutely did have a barn coat style that was similar to this shirt. So that is my plan. I'm sort of biting my nails in thinking about that I'm cutting this shirt. And then once we have that clean cut, because of the amount of fabric that I have to remove, I can't do a self hem, meaning making another hem with the fabric, because it just, I think, would make it too short. So what I am going to do is, this is known as bias trim or bias tape. And you can get it at most sewing supply stores. I normally find mine at estate sales. I like to use 100% cotton. And this shirt is actually a beautiful brushed twill that is also 100% cotton. So I think it'll work well. So those are the two steps that we'll need to do. So we're first going to cut, then we're going to finish the hem. And I'm going to take you step by step on how to repair this shirt. And that leads me to, why am I bothering to repair this shirt? Dean, as we know, famously played Almanzo Wilder on Little House on the Prairie. And when you think about not only the pioneers, but also the characters on the television show, you saw each week, in episode after episode, they would wear the same garments, the same costumes, if you will, because during that time period, during that era, and this is, this is around late 1870s, early 1880s, because he and Laura in real life were married in 1885. And of course, they knew one another for a few years before then. So when you're thinking about that time, people on average only had 2, 3, maybe 4 shirts, 2, 3 pair of pants, and fabric was very expensive. And in thinking about Laura's mother, Carolyn, for years and years, she did all of the family sewing by hand. It is a very famous scene in the books when they finally get a treadle sewing machine. And so in thinking about Carolyn hand sewing all those clothes and the amount of time that it took, if this would have been Charles, she would have absolutely repaired this shirt. And I think the same would hold true for Angelina Wilder, who was Almanzo's mother. Famously in Farmer Boy, it talks about that she even wove her own cloth. This was a highly skilled woman. Her skills with the needle, based on the descriptions of the clothing that she made in that book, she too would have been an incredible seamstress, an incredible sewist. And so I thought it was important to share in this world that is now predominantly filled with fast fashion, that we can take a shirt that has been damaged and transform it to give many more years of wear and life to that shirt, because that is very much the pioneer mentality. And if you have listened to Dean in his interviews, but also he has a new book that just recently came out in June titled Prairie Man, and I will link down below to that book. His family, has also been here as hardworking people for generations. And so that is something I think that it would have been very much ingrained into Dean's personal family. He talks about in his book, you know, this farm, this ranch. Even as a small boy, he remembered that there was no hot running water, that they were reading books in the evenings by candlelight. So he has definitely that pioneer work ethic and mentality himself. So we are going to go to the cutting table next. And I'm going to cut this shirt up. Say a prayer. Send good thoughts. We are now getting ready to cut Dean's shirt. And some of the tools that I will be using is this cutting mat. And as you can see, it has gridded lines, and that'll help to ensure that my cut is straight. And this is kind of a lipped ruler. It goes to the edge of the mat over the fabric, and again, this is just another way that I'm going to be able to get that straight edge. And then how I will cut it is the rotary cutter. This is a very sharp blade, so for now I have it covered while I am lining up the shirt. Now, since the tear is in the back, that is where I'm actually gonna start my cut. And how I'm gonna line it up is the side seam here. Okay, we're gonna get that straight. And because there are some curves with the armhole and the fabric itself, just might have to manipulate the fabric a little bit and smooth it out as best as I can. Okay, so I know, let's see, we are going to be coming up, yeah, about 3 inches that we're going to be taking off. Overall, I am as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs right now. The only saving grace is because I only get one opportunity to cut this shirt and I need to do it right. The only saving grace is that if it goes wildly wrong, then I will just buy Dean a new shirt. So again, I think I'm going to start from the edge closest to the camera. Just going to line that up there. I'm doing this by feel. You can kind of see that I'm taking this, and that side seam is lined up against the cutting mat. Now, in thinking about how Caroline might have done this, she probably would have done it on the floor with a grid. They had aids during the time that Ma was sewing. Not as fancy as this, but okay. Now, you know, the thing about sewing is you just, it's the age-old measure twice, cut once. You just have to take your time. Okay. So now we're right on either end. I've measured, so it is now even. Okay. I'm ready to cut. All right. Dean, if you're watching, look away. Okay, so I'm gonna come and, because this is a thicker brushed twill, you're gonna see me kind of go back and forth. I did put a new blade in. Okay, it's cutting. And then I'm gonna flip it around, okay, and line it up. So, again, let's take our time. You know, there's never any rush. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to line it up on the edge and then also line it up down here, the edge that I just cut off, okay? So again, go over it once and twice and then just double check, yeah. Now, let's go ahead and move it down so we've made a straight cut all the way along the back. And now I'm gonna line up the cut that we just did, and then again, you know, you're manipulating the fabric because of the curves that occur for the shirt design. If I were just cutting flat fabric, it wouldn't be as challenging, but I have to make note of the curves and just reposition it and line it up. Okay, and then I'm looking here, so this is on this line, and so if I, okay, now I've just realized that there are some buttons here. Shirt makers always attach new and extra buttons on the inside of shirts in case you lose one, but I need to remove those now in order to make sure that the fabric is flat and I get a crisp cut. So I'm gonna stop and go grab my seam ripper. This is my seam ripper. And basically what I'm gonna do is, it's just, these buttons are attached with just a few threads. So I'm taking the edge of that seam ripper very carefully because we don't want to damage the fabric. We just want to remove these buttons. So again, taking care that I'm only catching the threads, not the fabric. And sometimes, you know, I have to come in from things from a different angle. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is take out the excess threads. I just don't want any bumps to interfere with that cut. Okay. I am actually going to come in from this angle now on this edge. So I apologize for turning my back, but in some ways then you can see. Okay, I need to go over one more time. Okay, and then there's just one more small section right at that side seam, and that's a little bit thicker because it is a flat felled seam, and that is a seam that has been completely enclosed. so it doesn't fray. Okay. Might take me a little bit. Yeah, it's taking a little bit. Wants to fight. I will win. Okay. All right. We're almost there. Okay, so now, again, just manipulating the fabric, and then I'm going to line up this edge to the edge of the mat, so I know I have a straight cut. Okay, and again, we have this side seam where the front piece is attached to the back, and that's a flat fill seam, so it's a little bit thicker. Gotta go over it a couple of times. Okay, there we go. Now we're just going, and then this front placket is also a double thickness. So I'm gonna pull the mat, pull the shirt a little bit more. So I'm not, you want to be safe. You always want to be safe. So this way, just putting the blade away from me. We're getting there. This beautiful twill fabric is beautifully thick, but it does require specific, careful cutting. Okay, so now what I need to do is put it back on the dress form and double check the measurements. So I've put Dean's shirt back on the dress form, and with my measuring tape, taking it from the seam where the back yoke starts, I've gone down in several key areas just to make sure that my measurements are correct and even, and then also making sure the front plackets also line up and are even. One thing that I'm going to do, which is going to be a little bit silly, sometimes dress forms can still distort clothing, if that makes sense. Because our bodies are a little bit looser and softer, not so rigid, clothing can hang differently. So Dean, I hope it's okay. I'm going to try on your shirt. Okay, in holding a camera, I hope that it is not going to distort it, but you can see if we button it at the neck, the front plackets measure evenly, and then turning to the side, the cut is even. Okay, let me switch hands. Okay, so we are most concerned about the bottom, so that's why I've angled the camera that way. Right now, I'm taking my hands and buttoning the top button of the front of the shirt, and then taking the placket all the way down, and you can see that it meets evenly and that the front looks even. And then we're carefully turning to the sides. Yeah, that looks pretty even. Turning to the sides. Now, I'm just going to make a teeny tiny hem. On me, this is a little bit longer for a barn coat, although, barber jackets, I have a barber wax jacket, and they come down a little bit further. But Dean, of course, is quite tall, so it will probably hit him again closer to the hip bone once it is finished. So let me start hemming and pinning, and I will show you that next step. am just about finished pinning on the bias tape to the shirt, and it has been right sides together. Let me come in for a close-up. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging for black on black. There, I think you can see it, but you can see my finger is in between the shirt and the bias binding. So I've folded it on the edge, so then when it's flipped, it's all enclosed. And you see that little fold line right there? That is actually where I am going to sew. That's going to be my guide. It's called Stitch in the Ditch. So I am going to start my machine up and we're going to sew all the way along there. I just did a smaller seam, so I come along there. And remember, kids, don't sew across your pins. Take them out as you sew. I always back stitch so it's nice and secure. And again, you know, the key to sewing is it's not a race. Take your time, because that's how you get a nice finished result. I'm just using that as my guide, taking out the pins, then readjust. Once we're done, we'll flip it over. Going over that side seam. Now I'm going to trim off this excess, but I'm going to leave enough of a tail. Again, I want to fold it over so that it measures up straight against the shirt placket. Now, because this is a work shirt, I am actually going to go over it a second time, just to make sure no seams are going to be popped, you know. We have now finished the edge of Dean's shirt. This is what it looks like on the outside, and of course the inside has the seam binding. Now there is a small section, again trying to see if you can see this. It's open a little bit. That's where the hem is. And so most people wouldn't even notice that. But as I said, I'm a little bit finicky. So this is definitely what I refer to as finishing work. Just gonna sew that edge, and I'm gonna tuck in the tail of my thread. Just make sure everything is tucked in. The seam binding, the shirt edge. About that manipulation of fabric, and I'm gonna pinch it tight. I'm just gonna sew that area closed. It's just one small step when you're hand finishing a garment, because I would not want to do that small section on the machine, because you can definitely always see machine stitching. You won't be able to see my tiny stitches here. But
the overall look will be nice and finished. And so I'm going to do this on either edge of the shirt, you know, and then it's basically finished. And, you know, given that we're talking about the Ingalls family and the Wilders, we do know that by the time Laura married, that Caroline had received her first sewing machine. So we know that Laura had access. She probably very much borrowed Caroline's machine. Indeed, there are stories of entire towns buying a single sewing machine to share, you know, that you would put in your money and then there would be a little sign-up sheet and everybody could take a turn with the sewing machine. But we also know stories of how Laura did a bunch of hand finishing. Remember when she made all of those buttonholes when she was sewing men's shirts to earn money. And so now I'm just going to do the other side. So, you know, for Dean's shirt, he absolutely needs to have a bit of hand stitching from another Laura Ingalls. Now, a lot of people assume that I am named after Laura Ingalls Wilder, which in fact I am not. We are actually named for the original, the OG, Laura Colby Ingalls, who was Charles's mother. If you read Little House in the Big Woods and the chapter Dance at Grandpa's, and Grandma danced a jig, that was the original Laura Ingalls. And my great-great-great-grandmother, when my grandfather, Lansford James, who was known as James, went off to fight in the Civil War, she gave him a small soldier's Bible, and it was the custom at the time that you would do an inscription. And she made an inscription at the front of the Bible and signed it, "Your mother, Laura Colby Ingalls." So that Bible was passed down to the eldest son till it reached my father, Paul. And when my parents found out they were expecting me, my father said, "If it's a girl, I want to name her Laura." All right, Laura Ingalls is done. Let's take a closer look. I'm going to put it on the dress form. Dean's shirt is finished, and it has now been transformed into a barn jacket. And so while it won't be anything that he would probably wear out in public, it absolutely can be worn as a warm secondary layer for doing chores or working outside. And it saved it from going into the landfill. So I hope you have enjoyed learning some sewing techniques and methods, as well as hearing a few stories. I will be back next week with a tour of my 19th century sewing space. If you're a Little House fan, there's lots of little hidden gems that I think you'll really enjoy. And
Throughout the summer season, I will be bringing the Little House costume collection to the Connecticut Festival, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Branson, and Texas. So if you're attending, please stop by. I'd love to meet you. If you enjoyed the video, please give a thumbs up and feel free to leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching. To make sure that it's even. And Eric just came home. I hear him.
Oh, hi, honey. Are you filming?
I'm filming!